say a few words of welcome. So this year, as every other year, we use the opportunity of International Open Access Week to reinforce our institution's commitment to open access and to critically look at it and debate this ever-evolving landscape. Despite the growth of open access and the fact that it is a fundamental aspect of the academic landscape, challenges do remain, including debates over financial models, concerns about quality control, and the sustainability of open access journals. But I'm very pleased today to welcome our in-person audience as well as our virtual audience.
Nou wat
And
is
I'm sure we're all
O,
looking
okay,
forward
soos jy sit met die
to a lively
skriftelike
session and
papiere dat jy nou moet. Okay, dis ja, nee, dis nou ja.
But in any case, colleagues, we have 4 panelists today, with Ms. Tice having joined only this morning. She did say that she's not prepared, but I know she's forever prepared for this topic, so she can never be underprepared when it comes to open access. She's, talked about open access for quite some time. And then the other panelist who's here in person with us, Professor Manley, Marena Manley. I will read her biography later. And then we've got Dr. Reggie Raju. Dr. Raju, I don't see you online. You are missing. But are you there? Yes, Dr. Raju. Welcome. We also have got Mr. Jeroen Sondevan. I hope I'm pronouncing you right, Mr. Sondevan. Welcome. So, colleagues, just to quickly read the biographies, really I'll be very short. I will not read, the whole document basically, or the biography, the whole biography, because this, as I'm saying, these are esteemed speakers. I'll start from overseas. Mr. Jeroen Sondevan. He has been involved in open access and open science for the past 15 years from the publishing world, that is for the Amsterdam University Press and Brill, and has gained initial experience, where he has gained initial experience with open access. In 2015, he started working as an open access publishing consultant at the Utrecht University Library. In 2019, he joined Utrecht University as open access program leader within the open science program. There are various roles that he has played. Currently, he's a member of advisory board for secondary rights, copyright, open access, institutional policies and rights retention, and also a member of the steering committee for MED-EXIF, an open preprint archive for media, film and communication sciences. And we are also a member of the governance group of the Open Book Futures Project, and a member of Coalition S, Open Access Expert Group. I will stop there. And then we also have got, I wanted to start with the speakers that are online. Dr. Reggie Raju, am I missing your biography here? Dr. Raju holds a PhD in information science and is the director at the University of Cape Town Libraries that is for research and learning services. He is the author of several publications in peer-reviewed national and international journals, and also, reads papers in conferences, in national and international conferences. And his research is focused on research librarianship with an emphasis on open access and library publishing. Dr. Raju, NRF rated researcher, which is not very common for somebody who's never been an academic, but who has always been a practitioner. But it does, pay to actually, also publish as you are a practitioner as well. As we can see, Dr. Raju is an NRF rated researcher. Of course, he focuses on open access, and he serves as a special advisor to national negotiations with vendors, that is in South Africa, as part of SANLIC. He's the chair of Spark Africa, and is driving the social justice agenda of open access for Africa. He has served in various editorial boards of journals, which is Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communication, and South African Journal of Libraries and Information Science, and is currently reading a number of projects at national and continental level. I do believe that, Reggie, you also chair the organizing committee for the Diamond Open Access conference that's going to happen at UCT. I'm just adding that. In any case, now moving on to Professor Marena Manley. Is a professor at the Department of Food Sciences, Stellenbosch University since 2010. She completed her PhD at Plymouth University in 1995, has supervised over 70 postgraduate students, published 134 peer-reviewed papers, and contributed to 7 book chapters. I'm sure that is now better than that. It has increased because this is quite old. We stole it from the website. In December 2022, she was awarded a Chancellor's Award in recognition for her research excellence at Stellenbosch University. And since 2023, she serves on the board of South African Academy of Sciences and Arts. I just wanted to say the reason why we invited here Professor Manley is because she leads in terms of taking advantage of the publishing agreements that we have with publishers, the transformational agreement. So she has taken advantage of that, and she actually has more papers than anyone published using that at Stellenbosch University. Hence, we decided to call her to be part of this. Of course, we also had her during our library research week, and she did a very good job. Thanks once again, Prof, for joining us in this discussion. Now, lastly, but not least, Ms. Ellen Tice. She is currently the Senior Director of the Library and Information Services at Stellenbosch University. She's a member currently of the Advisory Committee on Freedom of Access to Information and Freedom of Expression, having chaired the body from 2019 to 2021. In this role, she was instrumental in updating the IFLA Open Access Statement, together, of course, with 2 other colleagues, or of her colleagues. Ms. Tice is the chairperson of the SANLIC board, a body that negotiates countrywide open access agreements with vendors, and a member of Universities South Africa Open Science Task Team. She was the first president of the Library and Information Association of South Africa, a position she held from 2000 to 2002, and from 1998 to 2000. And she's also a former president of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions from 2009 to 2011. And while she was in that position, she championed strong focus on strengthening library associations and the promotion of open access within the library sector. She is an active and prominent open science, open access advocate, and a sought after speaker on open science matters. So you can see the caliber of people that we have here. So the way that I will do this is just to ask if if the speakers would like to do some introductory remarks, the panelists, and I will give each of them not more than 3 minutes to just, do some brief introductory remarks before we can start with the questions. Maybe I will start with you, Dr. Reggie Raju. If you have any introductory remarks, a panelist that doesn't have, it's fine. You can say, I don't want to make introductory remarks. I want to only respond when there are questions. Dr. Raju?
I will respond to the questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe what I forgot to also indicate, colleagues, is that the theme is community over commercialization. We decided not to change the theme as it was provided by the committee that decides on the International Open Access Week. So we are going with that theme. Do you have any opening remarks that you want to make, Mr. Sondervan?
No. I think I will address more in detail also the situation here in the Netherlands and also Europe in answering the questions as well. So that's fine for now. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And the in-person speakers, I see Prof. Marena seems to be willing to go.
Everybody, people here, and is it better? No, is it okay? Oh, it sounds like it's echoing. Okay, but something came to mind when you just mentioned sort of open access again, and I realized it quite recently, and it's something that we as researchers forget, is when we talk about open access, we published a paper, open access, we always think, oh, it's available for other researchers. And then suddenly I realized one day, but it's actually available for the man on the street. It's literally available for everybody. And that, I think one sometimes forget. We tend to talk within the academic environment and forget actually how information is really now available to just about everybody. Thank you, Sabiwe.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. So basically that, social impact aspect of open access that you are touching on. I'm not sure if Ms. Tice, I did say that she's ever ready. She only accepted this morning. Maybe she wants to make introductory remarks. Okay.
So first, I would also like to take the opportunity to thank
It is. To first of all thank our guests and the co-panelists for making themselves available and accepted our invitation, because of course everybody is celebrating and having activities which has become International Open Access Week, a real worldwide event where we want to focus and make everybody more aware. As we've just heard from Professor Manley, that even as academics, that they don't necessarily always understand the full scale of open access. So I just want to say, in the case of and Reggie, of course, we have been were partners in crime since 16 years ago, and when he was also here at Stellenbosch University, and that we worked on this commitment that we have taken at Stellenbosch University to advocate and do everything that we can to advance open access publishing and open science. And Jeroen, we have sort of met online when he also presented to USAF University South Africa. It's a task team that are looking at drafting a national framework and a national plan for open access and open access publishing in South Africa. Now, what I would like to share with everybody, and I'm sure many of you who are also joining us online are probably aware of this, but Stellenbosch University was one of the first, I think not one of the first, I think the only other one at the time was, I think, the institution in Egypt who had signed the Berlin, which is one of the 3 open access declarations, had signed the Berlin Open Access Declaration here at Stellenbosch University. Since then, many other universities in Africa and in South Africa had also joined and signed this declaration, which is this commitment to promote open access and to making scientific publications more accessible and available to everyone. And information technology had given us those advances. So the whole drive behind this was that anybody with access to the internet, and in terms of what we publish, needs to be available, not just to advance science, but so that the public can actually benefit from that. After the signing of the declaration, we were also the first institution, who had hosted the first Berlin Open Access Conference here in South Africa. First time in Africa, was hosted in 2012, and that had just emphasized our role in that. Then, of course, we have also played a leading role in other open access initiatives at Stellenbosch in terms of a mandate for our repository for research output, and that is since 2008. We have several other digital repositories that is all around making the Stellenbosch University's research output more visible, and there are huge benefits by doing this. As we can see, the university rankings, that is continuously improving, and that is a result of the fact that the university's research are made more accessible, more visible through our repositories. I just want to add one thing. I'm just making up so that for the time that we allocated for this. We recently hosted, sorry, I just want to go back to what was the main driver for this, and how libraries became involved in open access. First of all, it was because of the really access and to read scientific or research output had become basically unaffordable for the majority of people who were not able to pay to read that material, that they can't do research. And of course, in Africa and even South Africa, it had just become unaffordable for us. So the high increases, so just keep increasing and increasing and increasing. And then, of course, they talked about the double dipping. First, we had researchers or government, we get subsidies, we pay for the research to be done. So and then of course we publish. So we then, the same research and the same money that was used to publish that material, what then happens, we have to go and now pay to read our own research. The research that has been paid by the taxpayers, you then go and you have to pay now to read that very same, your intellectual input, the work that you've been done. And of course, being in South Africa, in a developing country, we purchase these. Nearly all the publishers, except for a few publishers in Africa and South Africa, are overseas, which means that we also have to pay that in a foreign exchange rate. So now you put on top of the fact, so we're not paying then in rand, we have now to pay in dollars and euro. And many of us had, every year we have to see, you know, what can we cancel still to afford to access then those journals. So of course that also led to the fact if you can't access the research, it also means that of course you are not able to publish and do research. So we were always at a disadvantage. And that's one of the reasons that we have to say, no, this can't continue. We can't continue to do this. And this whole theme around community over commercialization, the commercialization of public knowledge, had become so big that, and many of these publishers, especially the big 5 publishers, they say some of them make more money. Their profit is more than all companies. That is how big and that is how much we pay for scientific, or just to read. And of course they do work. So that's a major, major reason why we said this has to stop. The community must take control over this again. And I just think one of the other areas which I know when it comes to social justice and being able to access this is when we recently had the international coalition of library consortia conference here in Cape Town, and we had 3 researchers speaking on the panel, one from Stellenbosch University and one from the University of Free State. And that is, of course, a major issue around the bias that there is also in research and in publishing research output. So the one researcher said that he submitted an article for publication. And of course, he showed his affiliation. And what happened? His article was rejected. So what he then did is he spoke to a colleague in somewhere in Europe. I can't remember if it was specifically in the UK or which country. He asked that colleague, can you please submit the same article. This happened recently. Submit this to the publisher. Guess what happened? All that they had to do was to change it to somebody else and the paper was accepted. The same, there were no changes made to the paper. The same paper was accepted. So we're addressing, what we're doing here is addressing all, it's not just, you know, making it accessible and available, but that we also have to address a number of other issues. The fact that Africa, and particularly this part of the world, has been marginalized, that we were not able to participate in the same way, and we are addressing all of those things. So with that, I think I'll leave it at that, so I don't have to answer too many questions afterwards.
Thank you, Ms. Tice. I did warn you once you give Ms. Tice this topic. She's very passionate about it. She can share a lot. But it is good to actually have an understanding of open access in that context that she has just given us. Colleagues, it's not very often that you get the National Librarian attending your event. I would like to acknowledge Ms. KP Madumole. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for attending. Now, in terms, by way of another question, maybe let me direct my question. I'm kind of jumping now to Mr. Jeroen Sondervan. Say, your university has a very clear policy on open science. So what role can policies and policymakers play in protecting the interests of academic and research communities from the growing influence of commercial entities?
Yes, thank you. And just to say that I fully agree with what has been said by the previous speaker, and I remember our encounter must have been half a year ago, I think, or a year ago already. But yeah, so and just to also be clear about my current role, because I'm now working at the Research Council, the Dutch Research Council, the NWO. But I'm in my previous position, I've been working at Utrecht University for quite some time. And yeah, so I think, and that this theme is spot on, because if I look at my own situation, the Dutch situation is that we have become maybe a bit of historical background. So our national ambition towards 100% open access started in 2013, when the government was really involved and stating that all the institutions, all researchers in the Netherlands should publish open access. And that was also the moment a year later, 2014, when we as institutions became involved in negotiating with the big publishers first in the first read and publish deal. So Springer was the first publisher where we struck a deal with in 2015. And now we are currently having 22, I think, from the back of my head, of these so-called read and publish deals, or as they are now called, transformative agreements. They are not transformative at all. That's the real issue here. And they're also really expensive, and the prices increase every year. And that's, I guess, also relating to what the previous speaker was saying. So in the old closed, there was this big dominance and marketization from the big publishers. And in this new realm of open access, we see the same again happening. And that's really, really a big issue. So I've been working firstly as a publisher, then within the university context, and now from the funder context. And I've always been committed to Diamond Open Access, so free to read, free to access. The more inclusive model, I would say. And as a policymaker now for some years, I try to convince both, let's say, on the productive side, right? So we need journals, we need more journals, we need more editorial boards committed to these more inclusive models. So I've been developing several projects and programs to really foster Diamond Open Access and to help editorial boards to engage with this model. And on the other side, I think it is also about advocacy and help researchers to make the right decisions and to help them to become agents, that they have a choice and that they can make a difference by choosing maybe another journal instead of going for the high prestige and the high reputable, so-called reputable journals, which are stuck in the real commercial settings. So I guess on the productive side, editorial boards, people that are working to set up journals and to foster them, either being at a society or maybe working for a publisher. And on the other side, the researchers that are publishing their work should be more aware of these developments and these options, I think. That is a challenge. And I guess there are really two elephants in the room where policymakers can help and hopefully will also collaborate on a global scale, I would say. And it is, the two elephants are basically recognition and rewards. We are really stuck into this, I call it the reputation economy. So you need to publish a lot, and you need to publish in high impact factor journals. And they're mostly stuck in these very expensive hybrid deals with the very large publishers, the very commercial ones. And the other elephant in the room is, I guess, how to really make it sustainable. On the other side, if we are going to a full OA situation, where hopefully we can find a way in subsidizing, financing, funding a publicly funded infrastructure that really supports the research community, but how to make it sustainable. That is really difficult on a national scale even, but also on international and maybe globally, this is really a challenge. And I guess we really need to find ways in in achieving that, because it's important to set the alternative to, so we won't get rid of the very highly commercial publishing businesses. That's an illusion, I think. But what we can do is really set alternatives and foster and advance with these more inclusive models from the institutional and funder perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sondervan. I see there is a hand from you, Dr. Reggie. Do you want to add anything from what he has just said?
I just want to add, I think we need to look at the whole research ecosystem. We can't isolate the publishing from the whole ecosystem. And I think in terms of the policymakers, there are different tiers in terms of policy making. If you start at maybe institutional level, the policymakers at institutional level, one needs to relook at recruitment and promotional processes, because those recruitment and promotional processes are predicated on historical practices. And historical practices basically meaning that it's non-open access. Government, and here maybe from a South African perspective, government needs to look at what is in the best interest of its citizenry. And I think this is where Prof talks about the man in the street or the woman in the street. In terms of this particular theme, at the epicenter of this theme is the whole issue of knowledge being a public good. And if we have to ensure that knowledge is a public good, then we need to make sure that the public has access to it. So coming back to the whole issue of policymakers, in terms of the South African government, we need to look at how we recognize those that are publishing open. We need to recognize that publishing internationally, how does one define international? What is international? Because we say international, but technically we mean publishing in European or American journals. We're not talking about publishing in a Zimbabwean journal or a Namibian journal. So our reward system, even the NRF, who is so pro open access, still is working with a very biased system where you're looking at rating if you have international impact, if you have international recognition. So, and we've actually lost sight of the purpose of research. The purpose of research is to address societal issues, issues that affect your region, people around you. And because we want to get promoted, we want to be ranked higher, we forget that we need to address these particular issues. So policymakers are inadvertently fostering, retaining that narrative that does not work with open. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Reggie. I particularly liked your input in terms of incentivizing and awarding, open access. I had wanted to ask you a question after this. Does any other panel member want to add anything on this? Go ahead, Prof.
I'll just try and be brief. I just want to comment on a couple of things where Jeroen mentioned that academics prefer publishing in prestige journals. So it takes us back to subscription journals, which now also offer open access. And the same with Reggie mentioned the award system. I think I'm just suddenly thinking, how did I start publishing open access? What scared academics away from publishing open access. It started off as subscription journals where we had the opportunity once a year where the library would fund us to publish open access. And then suddenly at the point, so you had sort of like one opportunity a year, which one used, but then suddenly all these open access journals just appeared. You got all these emails, please publish open access, it costs a bit of money. And then it became publish open access, we publish your paper within 10 days, we pay the money. And then we became aware of predatory journals. And I think the huge number of predatory journals trying to get researchers to publish open access scared us away from purely open access journals, and we went back to subscription journals. I just want to mention that quickly. I think it's changing again, but there are still some publishers that I wouldn't touch because one's still worried that it might be a predatory journal and you do not want to risk getting your work in journals such as that. Thank you, Sipiwe.
Thank you. The point you've just made, I think it goes back to what Mr. Sondervan said in terms of educating researchers and even doing it all the time in different ways, so that there is an understanding of the difference, between open access and predatory journals, so that they are able to identify, those. But in any case, maybe again, let me come to you, Prof. As an academic, so how do you think academic communities can ensure that open access remains community-driven and not overtaken by commercial interests?
I think that actually adds on to my comment that I've just made now. And I think as far as academics are concerned, I do not think we completely aware of all the open access opportunities, repositories that's available, open science that's available. I think we may be still not properly informed about it, or we don't have time to look at that. So I think that's maybe one reason. And when you get the opportunity to publish open access, one think, okay, you get to the end of the process, you tick open access, and then suddenly more questions appear. Do you want gold open access? And think, okay, maybe that's a good thing. You pick gold open access. And then when it comes to publishing, it says, do you want CC BY, CC BY NC, CC BY CC ND, CC BY NC ND? And then you're just completely confused again. And I think, and the latest that's now happening is when you submit a paper, they ask you, do you want to do a preprint? And now you're unaware of what this preprint means. And then you say, oh, yes, let's do a preprint. And then you realize somebody rejected your papers out of scope, but they kept the preprint. And now what happens now? If you now send to another journal, will that now be plagiarism because it sits as a preprint somewhere? So I think we as academics really probably need a proper session by the library really to inform us about all these things, to make sure that we don't scare away from community-driven work. Because you think when you do community-based open access, oh, now you sort of lose control of your work. Somebody else can just take it and run away with it. So I think that's maybe something that sort of prevent us as researchers really to completely open up to community-driven research. So I think we trust our universities' repositories, but I've checked there's like a huge range of repositories for a range of different subject areas where you can put your preprint, get feedback from peers, which I think we're not even properly aware of, and I think scared to use to some extent, because you're scared to put your work out there, not sure what's going to happen with it. Thank you, Sipiwe.
Thank you so much, Prof. Does any other panelists? Oh, I see there are two hands online. You're also willing to go, Ms. Tice. Maybe let me start with you, and then I'll come with Dr. Reggie and then Mr. Sonderman.
Yes, I just want to firstly say I take note of the issue around awareness and continuing education. And I speak to the colleagues and say, sending out, you know, oh, we've got these agreements, and once a year we tell them, okay, you know, it's wonderful, the library can provide this and so on. And then we do have, of course, training opportunities through our workshops and so on. However, we do know that the message don't go through completely. And I think it does show that, yes, we absolutely have to work on it, because it's changing all the times. The models are changing. So I do take that note, and that we need to look into that. But I think the other issues that's being addressed, and why it becomes, and even for librarians, it is difficult to necessarily follow this and advise properly, is the way that each publisher had set up. And they're all different. I once told a group of publishers, I said to them, actually, listen, the library world can tell you, we have standardized, and we can standardize. We have all the material that has ever been published, and we have an international organization that does that through OCLC. So every library knows, in terms of the metadata, in terms of the options, what you have to do. But of course, the publishers, because they're commercial, and libraries are not commercial, so they want to attract people into that. So they instead of, they say they make it easier, so that you say, okay, no, maybe, you know, these are the various options. And some of them are now, have listened now to us. They are getting now to the point where the default, if the journal is eligible for open access, and your library is part of that agreement, your default will be that you publish CC BY, because because people don't. And then, as you say, there's these various options. Then they say, okay, they can also academic freedom. They still want to leave it, because the academics do feel that they want to decide, as Jeroen had mentioned, where do they want to publish, in which journal they want to publish. Then they give you all these options, and then you confuse everybody more than that. You know, why giving you? You just need to say, yes, can I publish in this publisher, and is my journal, you know, this is my first choice that I went to in any case. So that's different ways in which they do it, and that makes it very, very difficult. But I just want to add one more thing, and that is what I referred to sort of in my opening remarks. The publishers have always been a few steps ahead of us. And we bought into this thing that it's only if I publish with this certain publisher, and some of the things that Reggie had referred to earlier on, that is going to help me. So it's a self-interest, which there's nothing wrong with it if you want to still have a career trajectory. So what, through these initiatives like International Open Access, making researchers aware that what you are actually getting yourself into, and that we need to fight this, because we have believed, if somebody's saying, you know, you can only get somewhere, you can only get rich if you do this, you can only get promoted if you do this, and then the other systems that are put in place, and you believe that because that's all that you know. They say, I only heard about this the other day, and Jerome could possibly also understand that a little bit from Dutch, but I hear this new thing, and I think it came from the Springboks and the rugby players. And I'm going to say it in Afrikaans, because julle weet nie wat ons weet. Of wat ons nie weet nie. And I think it is a lot, this really is, I think, and it's probably in a lot of the cases, in the way that the publishers have worked, that there are things that we just don't know. Because, and we don't know what you know and what you don't know. And that is unfortunately that it put us in this situation. And I think these initiatives, such as amongst other, the Diamond Open Access conference that's coming up, as well as many of the other initiatives, are to make people actually, to educate them and to make them aware that this, what they have believed, it is the only way or the best way to do is indeed not, and just open up their minds that you can still achieve that, and you can also make sure that it has impact. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Tice. Reggie, do you still want to add anything, Reggie and Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Moderator. Look, I think one needs to be realistic. At this point in time, the commercial entities have the monopoly over the publishing ecosystem. That is a reality. They have hijacked a philanthropic movement. And what they have done is converted a philanthropic model into a business model. And as Ellen said, we are all thinking now in terms of this business model. We're talking about transformative agreements, but at the epicenter of the transformative agreements is a business model. People are talking about subscribe to open. At the center of that is a business model. And I think if we want to ensure that knowledge is a public good, we need to break that narrative. And the one way to do that is for us, for the academics, to reclaim their scholarship. I mean, the major funders are now saying, we are not going to support the APC model. We are going to invest all our money in supporting the development of infrastructure that advances Diamond Open Access. I'm not sure how familiar colleagues are with the class action lawsuit by Professor Lucinda Uden, who is a neuroscientist from the University of California. She is challenging the big six, and here we look at ASTM journals, who have a stranglehold of more than 50% of the publishing market. And at the center of this lawsuit is the fact that publishers are colluding with each other to lock out possibilities. They're colluding to ensure that the academics are not paid for their intellectual contribution. The peer reviewers are not paid for their intellectual contribution. So that is the kind of lawsuit, class action lawsuit, that is being led in the US. And the reason why I brought this up, this is part of us claiming back our scholarship. And we as librarians, and I'm talking to the librarians in the audience, we need to support the academics in claiming back that scholarship. And once we claim back that scholarship, we then need to put in place interventions that will now lock out the commercial interests. Thanks, Chair.
So much, Reggie. Jeroen, you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a few things, and also responding to the previous speakers. So I completely agree with you, Reggie, that we need to give, also from the policy, but also from the library. So the supports, I would say the supporters, right? The research support in general, but also to give the researchers the agency, right, to make the rightful decisions and the right decisions. And just to comment also on the capitalization and the monopolization of research. So just recently, Springer has announced that they will go to the stock market, and they will possibly gather billions from shareholders. So again, we have another big shareholder company, Elsevier, and others were already that, but Springer was a family company. But now, okay, now it's becoming a stock market company, a shareholder company, and then the need for profit is even more. So yeah, we see several of these developments which are really concerning. And another comment is and that's from also a response to the question how to help researchers and in their way, because it's becoming more difficult every day, I would say, the different licenses and the different options, and that is really a concern. So in the Netherlands, we have the libraries are really working together for years now, and in really giving the right support to the researchers. But again, it's also starting to become really complicated. So that's an issue which I take home every day as well. As also as a policymaker, we should unburden the researchers. That open access is just not like another button or check the box. It's just how it should be, and it goes smooth. And yeah, so that's yeah, maybe a final remark on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe coming back to you again, Reggie. So in the context, like in the Global South, so what unique challenges do communities, face in terms of, resisting commercialization in favor of more equitable and open source systems?
So, sorry, I didn't get.
Okay, in the context of the Global South, what unique challenges do communities face in resisting commercialization in favor of a more equitable and open source systems? So the issue of equitable access, social justice that you normally, talk about.
Look, I think when we talk about challenges, as indicated by Ellen, we in the people in the Global South have a myriad of challenges to navigate. Ellen talked about geographic bias. There is this whole issue of editorial and peer review bias, and there are numerous examples in the literature that talk about this peer review and editorial bias. Then there's contextual bias. And what's happened over a period of time is what I call research pilgrimage. Researchers want to get published. That is their core responsibility. But what's happening now is that because of all of the other issues that are around that, the issue of promotion, the issue of tenure, and such, the issue of rating, all centers around having this kind of international impact. And what's happened is that researchers are now having to respond to research issues that are not germane to their particular environments. Now, if you look at some of the works by Charlotte Rowe, she talks about the fact that the Global North sets the research agenda, and the Global South has to now respond to the research agenda set by the Global North. And here, Charlotte Rowe gives the example of 5 of the top economics journals in America. And she looks at all of the contributions by Global South authors in these journals. And more than 90% of these authors are writing about issues that respond to Global North challenges. So here you have Global South authors writing about Global North issues. So that is what I talk about when I talk about research pilgrimage. You want to get published, so you have to then conform to all of those challenges. And then you have to then address the issue about APCs. Now, if you look at the cost of one APC, that's about, on average, about $3,000, and that equates to, my calculation says me around about 55,000 rands. How many research can afford to pay that? So what we tend to do is we collaborate with researchers from the Global North so that we can get published. And when we start looking at equitable access, what does equitable access mean? We don't want access to issues or content that doesn't address regional issues. So you could see the kind of bridge that this open access movement has brought. Remember, I am an open access advocate. And I am now saying that we need to find another model that can bring back the whole issue of social justice, the whole issue of equitable and inclusivity, bring back the research agenda to address the fundamental principles of research. And the fundamental principle of research is to find solutions for your local community. So the open access movement has been hijacked, and so has the research agenda. So if we're looking at equitable access, then we need to start rethinking how we're going to support this particular process. And as Jerome had mentioned, we're talking about diamond open access. And again, in terms of diamond open access, how the Global North sees diamond is very different from how the Global South sees diamond. There are nuances within that definition. Jerome talked about free to the reader, free to the author. We need to look at how we deconstruct all of those biases and reconstruct a publishing ecosystem that supports the publication of Global South research. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Raju. I'll give one more speaker maybe to just say something on this. One more panelist. Go ahead, Prof.
If I can just comment on that, that's again now I'm wearing the hat of an academic. I know in South Africa we have so much indigenous knowledge, and that's not published in South Africa. There's almost like this gateway that prevents us from publishing our own indigenous knowledge in South Africa. We also get biopiracy, where companies in the north patent our own indigenous medicinal plants. So that's one issue. But I just want to mention something else where what's always in the back of the mind of South African academics is the fact that we get subsidy for publications. And there's a list of journals that's listed by Department of Higher Education that we get subsidy for. So before we publish, we always check, okay, will I get subsidy for this paper? So I just want to put that out there as well. That's also something that we look at. So when it comes to open access, open science, researcher will always check. It's not a huge amount of money that at Stellenbosch that comes to the researchers, but it does make a difference. All these little bits add up. So it does contribute to when we decide where to publish. And I just want to mention something else, and this is definitely where we get judged to some extent. A lot of my research is on maize, and we work on maize for food. So we submit it to food journals, and it always gets rejected for out of scope, because the minute when people see we work on maize, they immediately associate it with animal feed. So that's just, yeah, so I think a lot of our indigenous knowledge sort of disappears as well because of not understanding or just being judged from being from Africa. Thank you,
I like the
Sibiwe.
way that you contextualized, this biasness with your example of maize and the fact that we are, using it a lot here for people to eat and elsewhere. It's regarded as animal feed. Oh, okay, you want to add something, Ms. Tice?
Yes, just to follow on the subsidy system, as Reggie had indicated, and this is certainly what we are trying to do. The International Science Council is also had come up with a number of principles. Many countries have developed, like in the Netherlands, also a system around a policy around and of course many of them have different incentives. So we know originally why the system was set up in South Africa, because they wanted to promote and increase outputs, and particularly also even with doctoral students. So Sibiwe had mentioned there is the STARS team, and I've also referred to it. It's been set up by University South Africa. And part of that is that, and as Reggie said, it's looking at the whole ecosystem. But one of the things that is being addressed and that we will be in the framework is especially that we need to address that, because I can guarantee you it comes up at every conference, internationally, nationally, regionally. It always comes up, this issue, and that issue is being addressed. The Deputy Director of the Open Access project of the NRF, the platform that they're creating, she made a point and she said, just imagine what will happen if all the institutions in the world come together and we say, we reject that the assessment system of research, by implication also the accreditation system and the incentive system, if all of them say, we don't make use of commercial publishers, because they had overtaken that as well. It's not just publishing the thing, they've taken all the indexes, the abstracts, they use that for evaluation, and so we bought into that thing. But just imagine if we agree that we will not use the commercial companies, their assessment of what quality is, and that researchers are, if researchers are assessed based on that, what a difference. My prediction is they are gone. They only have this power because they determine how researchers are promoted, how they're able to think that they, or not think, that is the way that it works, to continue to do research. It will be game over if we do change that part of the system, because I think that is the root of the cause, the root of the problem. It is because that is the only way that we now think that we can do this. So of course, we're probably never going to get to that point, because of course every university is autonomous. We're even autonomous in South Africa. But if the international community can really agree on that, I think that will be the game changer in terms of how do we look at this, if we use that for assessment. And in case of South Africa, it's one of the things that we're asking, that should be reassessed, and whether, of course, we know Professor Johan Maton at CREST, they're busy with this program, is exactly to look into this as well. So hopefully something will come out of that, but the original system that has been set up in terms of how this works is clearly no longer, I mean, it was set up long before there was even an electronic journal available, before we had this kind of systems that we have in place. So it needs to be challenged and it has to change. It's the only way that we will be able to win this fight of community over commercialization.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see there is a hand up from Mr. Sondervan. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, just briefly respond on that, and just to give a few examples, and I fully agree. We are really depending on many of these systems, either the journals, either the bibliographic databases like Web of Science and Scopus and etc. etc. So when I was at Utrecht, we decided to make a statement, first to really move away. So signing DORA, the Declaration of Research Assessment, signing something is one thing, but Utrecht decided at some point a few years back to really move away from the journal impact factor. So not using the journal impact factor for hiring and promotion, not listing them in the assessments, etc., etc. So this was really a first step. Then, so on the ground, it's still very difficult to first of all to raise awareness, and then also to inform all the assessment committees and the people that are involved and the reviewers to actually do it. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. Another step Utrecht has taken recently or last year is not providing any data to the Times Higher Education ranking anymore. And some universities in the Netherlands have followed, and Zurich in Switzerland has followed. Just a minority. So my question also is still, and that's something I struggle with, but maybe the other panelists have some ideas. So we need a critical mass. We need so not a small community, but we need the entire research community to make the step. But how do we? Yeah, how can we make it into a collective step that we move away from these commercial products in general? Any yeah.
Thank you very, very much. There's a lot of perspectives that are actually coming out and insights that have been brought up. Now, I'll just ask a question that links this to sustainable human development. I'm sure you all didn't see this one, but I'll ask it in any case. I did warn Ms. Thijs that I'll ask a question regarding this, but the other three, I don't think you are aware of this question. But in any case, you can contribute. But I'll direct it to Ms. Thijs. So, Ms. Thijs, in the past few years, you have played a huge role to ensure that commercial interests do not end up overtaking access to information interests. So one of your roles at IFLA has led to the updating of the open access statement to explicitly link open access to sustainable human development. So can you tell us how and to what extent does open access to information contribute to the SDGs?
So I actually think, Marlene, you will probably be able to speak, especially in terms of your discipline, and give concrete examples. So I'm taking a short route here, and I actually had to go and look this up to make sure, again, as Reggie would probably say, how do you define and what is human development? So if we look at the 17 goals, as you all know, and of this, all 17 goals speak to human development, because whether it's education, whether it's poverty, whether it's health, whether it is the climate, everything speaks to human development. And if you go to the website, and if you look and you read about the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically in terms of access to information, which is of course what we are promoting, it says clearly, access to information is critical for the development and for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And why is it important? Because by providing access to the public, to people that tell us the data that we need to understand why this is a problem, how did we actually address that problem, and how should we try and address that particular problem. So it is really about, on the one hand, government's responsibilities to do so. On the other hand, it is so important also to empower the public, because to make the decisions, why is it important also? Because if we have access to information, access to the data, if the governments tell us they want to do this and they're going to do that, that we must hold them accountable. So it's about accountability, holding them to cover, evaluating also those that are responsible for implementing and monitoring the SDGs, and facilitate effective public participation. So this for me is really at the base or at the bottom of what and why it is important for us to play a huge role, and that through libraries and through open access, through open science, it's about making available this information. And I just, of course, UNESCO has been asked that they need to actually monitor how access to information is assisting in helping to achieve these goals. So that's really, it's the main part of it. But I would like to give an example, a general example, how we can see how by promoting and having access to information, how it contributes to development and to address whatever issues we have. It's not that long ago that we know about the sustainable around the pandemic and COVID. What happened? How were we able to deal with the issue around the effect of, and we know millions of people have died in the world. We know there was this huge attempt to get the vaccines in order to address this issue. It had impact economically. It had impact travel. People couldn't travel. It had impact on the availability of food, all of those kinds of things. And if it wasn't, because of course this was an international crisis, one, that the patents for the development of vaccines were, and of course people still made a lot of money, but they made it open. They made it possible for those countries that would not have been able to do it to help to assist with that. But it's not just, it was the data, you know, so that others can go and build on that. Mimi recently again showed me something, and we have done that exercise also in the first 2 years with COVID. And we particularly looked at, because again, they're the publishers that allowed for preprints, because you couldn't wait for a year before something is first available, published, and then make it available, because the need was there immediately. So we could see how access to information demonstrated, because as soon as something was published or was available to be published, it was made immediately available so that others could go and see. There was a crisis. So for me, that is probably the best example that we can show what a change and what a difference that it made. Many of the publishers had in fact made available many of the material, even if you did not subscribe to it, because people needed the information then to deal with how, and we could see how the access and how that had addressed a particular problem in time. Of course, 2 years, 3 years down the line, we're back and the publishers are putting up the increased the prices again. And now they tell us, you know, we even have to pay more to publish the material. What does it mean? They're holding back. How can we develop if people that probably need it more than those that can afford to pay and can afford to access it? So that for me is absolutely the reason how we contribute through open science and open access, by empowering people, giving them the information so that they can develop. A lot of these startup companies, my view, AI helps now with this. Again, in terms of, if you look at the economy, if you look at anything, you can go and read. How did those people became, where did they find that? Because they were able to find the information. But now some people will say, because it's open access, anybody can get the information. But if it benefits the world, if it benefits a community, why shouldn't it be open? And if somebody else can use this and help, they can do it.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add one comment.
Sorry, Prof, before you add, maybe I'll open even for the audience to ask questions now, as I'm also asking questions because we are running out of time. So if you want to do any follow-ups to any of the speakers as they are speaking, please raise your hand and just comment. Prof? Yes.
Listening now to what Ellen was saying, I think what we need to be able to achieve this is a huge mind shift in the heads of the academics, because we work in a really, really competitive environment. We publish to survive, we publish all these things, and this is what Jeroen was saying, we need that mind shift to really move into open science, open access, because this is our livelihood. So I think we need to, we need the mind shift to publish for the good of the public and not publish to survive. I think that's what we probably need. So I'm going to ask, the next thing I'm going to do with my colleagues, I'm just going to ask them, what does open access means to them? Open access immediately tells me, costs money. Or, so I'm just going to ask that question now. What does open access, what does community-driven open access means to them if they actually thought about that? So this was really informative for me. Thank you, Sriwe.
Thank you so much, Prof. That's why we have you here. You do advocacy for us. There was that promising before. Go ahead, Reggie.
Yeah, I just want to add in terms of the question that you posed to Ellen. The 1947 Universal Declaration of Human Rights has two significant components. The one is the right to have access to information. And the second, which we all have forgotten, the right to distribute information. And I think we're so focused on access that we've forgotten about the concept of distribution. And the reason why I bring up the whole issue of distribution in terms of human development, right? You have to be able to share. There has to be forums in which you can share your research so that your society can benefit. And I'll give you an example. Professor Mary from Kenya, she had on numerous occasions tried to get her work published in what is deemed international journals. It has always been rejected. One of the reasons for rejection was that they were not interested in African weed. That was a reason given. They had no problem with the science. They had a problem with the fact that it dealt with African weed. So she published her findings in open African journals. And no sooner were those published that the governments got involved in this, to the extent that the school feeding schemes on the East African coast are all built around the findings of Mary. So it comes back to the issue of what Ellen said, and that is all of these get tied into the 17 SDGs. Thanks, Sipiwe.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience before I proceed with my questions? Online audience, in person, any questions? Okay, I wanted to give you an opportunity to also contribute, colleagues, so that we don't end up having a discussion on our own. And you could, yes, I still have a last, let me give you a last one. So it's sort of a very open question that I'm asking now. Where do you see the balance between community and commercialization heading in the future? Do you foresee a future where open access, is the default for scholarly publishing? Will commercial publishers always play a major role in terms of publishing? I'm just putting those questions out there. Anybody, can just respond among the panelists.
Shall I start? I think the one thing that we haven't really mentioned is the quality of research that we publish. And I maybe just want to mention that. And I think probably what we do, well, we really try to submit good quality work, but you also to some extent rely on the reviewers to provide you with good feedback. And I've really seen how you can improve a paper from really good feedback from reviewers. And this is actually just academics amongst ourselves. And I think that's a responsibility that we should then continue with open access work to ensure with informal or formal review that the quality of research remains the same. The one thing, again, just going back to subscription journals, because that's what I grew up with and that's what I'm used to use, is when you submit in a subscription journal, it gets to some extent really well edited. So you get it back with all the little editings they've done. So you know it's should be in a good quality. And I don't think that happens. I'm not sure to what extent it would happen with open science or other open access platforms. So for me, it just remains important that, and I think it's our own responsibility among scientists themselves to ensure that the work that's published is still good quality, of significance. And although, as Jeroen suggested, take away the impact factors of the journal, but that the research still makes impact. So just a quick comment then on that. Thanks, Sipiwe.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody who wants to maybe quickly respond to Prof?
Maybe just to say the issues that you raised are really critical, and it goes back again to we can't only address the APCs. It's not just the APCs. It's about all of those things. Now, of course, and I've done a project at CREST once, and we looked at open review, because when you look at open science, there are also open reviews, and they say the huge benefits of open reviewers, because if we rely just on the reviewers or the editorial that the publishers are providing, as Reggie said, there's the issue also around cost and paying some of these reviewers. That they say if the public, if you put out your research there, and you actually have the public and the people who you actually want to read and so on, that there are also benefits about it. So they are always on both sides. Excuse me. But I think in terms of the question that you posed, it's as Reggie said, we have to be realistic. We're probably not going to, I don't even want to predict. The Berlin Declaration was signed in 2003. It was, the 20 years were sort of celebrated last year. And then, of course, there was the other two Bs as well. Budapest one, and I can't remember the other one, but the tester. So, but the point is, we have to start thinking, and if we get it right, we didn't get it so far right. Even when the publishers came with that, when they saw they're going to lose out here, then they came with this whole thing about paying now to publish, and they still able, and then the models and the models. We have to look at a model that, and this idea that obviously the quality would not be compromised, but we also need to set new rules for the quality, because again, you know, that's why other countries, South America, China, India, they've done their own thing, they've done their things, they don't necessarily rely, because again, on whose model do we assess? Based on the Western model? So we would need to address all of those things in order to say, so we're not looking at something inferior, we're looking at something that's going to be still as robust in terms of academic, but it also needs to be localized. You talked about indigenous knowledge. So, you know, if somebody sitting at Oxford University would be able to really comment, as you said, with the maize example, you know, because in the people there in Kenya, or even here just in Mpumalanga, if we do research on sheep, but somebody in somewhere else, they don't care, but we want to publish it in that journal. Sorry.
Thank you so much. So basically, we need to look at impacts, not just impact as in research impact. How do we impact society? How do we impact the public, etc. So, Prof, you want to just say last minute?
Yeah, I've actually forgot what I want to say. No, just based on Ellen's what she just explained. I think your biggest challenge is going to be changing the mind shifts of the academics, and that I've realized now, listening to all the discussions. I think that's going to be your biggest challenge. Is we sort of trained to have a certain mindset about publishing. And you now want to turn it complete. Well, you want to go back what it's meant to be to do research by making your information available. And it became something completely different. So that mind shift to go back to from the original reason for doing research. Thank you. Sorry, Sipi.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
But I am taking sort of my prerogative here to say this. And I don't know if Reggie wants to make a prediction, or Jeroen. But I do think the steps that we're taking by taking back and reclaiming the scholarly publication process, and if there is the will and the understanding, you know, from the leaders and the organizations that understand, and we set this as the new standard, then I do think, and we won't even talk about open access, we will just talk about publishing, that it will be the default, because we are now, it's the commercial publishers won't have the power and the control. Once they lose that control, and the new model are more and more accepted as the way, and we do get, there is ground that we're making on this. I just don't want, if it's 5 years or 10 years, but if all goes well, and people do buy into this thing, that we can make it, that the money that we're giving to the publishers, that same money we can use to set up the systems and to ensure that the editorial boards, that the quality, that there won't be any compromise on this. And if people believe that, they had done it before commercial publishers were there, the societies that did it and everybody else. So we can take, if we do take that back, then it will just be scholarly publishing that is open for everybody to access it and to be able to do research. And we set up the systems on how do we finance that, and it could happen, and I hope in our lifetime.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Tice. I'm sorry, I will not give the panelists an opportunity to make final remarks. So we've already run out of time. But maybe it's just to thank you for sharing your insights. I will not even summarize, but it's just to say, really, when we talk about open science, open access, it just shows that we must always be conscious, of the fact that it needs new thinking, and that it requires a mindset shift, so that we don't do things that we've always done. People are not always comfortable with change, so we must be patient, keep on trying to persuade and advocate for this, and there's a need to advocate for this every day, not just today, and ensure that the future is indeed open science. I must apologize to the program director. I did take up a lot of your time. But I'll just, give the platform back to you to just do a vote of thanks. And thank you so much once again, panelists. I really appreciate your time as well as your insights and perspectives. Thanks.
Thanks, Sibiwe. I just want to check quickly, is anybody monitoring the chat? Is that okay? Okay, all right, okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Sibiwe. Good job as usual. I told you it could get a bit lively. It did, once again. So yes, a very heartfelt thanks to all our panelists, Jeroen, Reggie, Prof. Manley, and Ellen. And I hope everybody has taken something away. I'm also not going to say much more. Sometimes I think we need to a complete different vocabulary, talking about what, for example, Reggie said, what we actually mean by international publications, etc. But it was also evident for me from being now exposed also to situations where one speak between researchers, between librarians and the publishers. I don't think we always speak the same language, which also might be a barrier to some of the things that we're trying to achieve. But anyway, on that note, thank you very much for everyone, also in person and online. And for our in-person people, I would like to invite you to the library staff room for some refreshments. Thank you. And our IT, sorry. Yes, to Henny, thank you so much for doing this for us and looking after the sound, and also Wouter and Sean. And then some of our colleagues in the background, Sakile, I think you're also still online, although you are on leave. Thanks for also contributing to this event today. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You didn't get a quotation for the